I mean, truly, the first 2 years I just fucked around and I was high most of it. But I remember the third year, and then that's when I kind of really understood a little bit more that this was a medium that you could actually share stories through that hadn't previously been shared through this, you know? And I was kind of like, oh man, all of those old little drawings and those old little imaginings and silly little scripts that I've been writing and this and that, like this is a viable career pathway, and I can start bringing these things onto screen. Feeling good, yeah. Yeah, first time doing this.
That's good.
I'm usually like a dark dweller, as you would have seen, cruising past the window.
Yeah.
Just sit behind the screen and like live up here. So to be on camera is not the best place to be.
You're not on camera at all. Where how would you describe yourself as a creative? Are you an artist? Are you a creator, an animator?
Yeah, I mean, look, when, you know, the formal title that's, you know, spread across, you know, whatever, the website, the bio, the this, the that, it's, you know, writer, director, you know, of animation.
And what do you think of yourself as internally? Is that something you navigate?
Yeah, I think so. Like I like to think of it as, I mean, and it's part of the most beautiful thing about what we do is the collaboration of it. Like, I don't know if that's a term, but a collaborator, you know, I love to work with people. I love to work with really good people, really good stories, with new technology, with exciting things to bring stories to life. And whatever the lubrication is, whatever, you know, I can be as a conduit to bring people together, to bring stories and technology together, different modalities. That's whatever that is in that space, and that's how I feel would best describe what I do.
Yeah. How do you start that process of bringing people together on a project?
Yeah, that's a really good one. And it varies, you know, like depending on what it is, you know, like if it's a community project, you know, and we're working with, let's say, like Mob Up in Nooka or whatnot. Like first,
Where's Nooka?
Northern Territory, just on the Roper River.
Oh yeah.
First port of call is like I need to speak with people from that community. I need to speak with artists, storytellers, knowledge keepers, different people that can speak on behalf of that country and their stories, you know. And a lot of like the work that we're doing is so much acting as kind of a facilitator for community and Blackfella stories that, you know, haven't existed in a digital space before.
Yeah.
So part of it is sort of like just enabling space for their voice to come into this realm.
Yeah.
You know?
Is there a part of you that like struggles with that, having those stories exist in that digital realm?
Yeah, you know what? Like I think the struggle sometimes is often, like we just mentioned that Aronofsky thing before we went live, you know, and there's only so much that you can do at like within an animated space that doesn't do justice or serve the depth of imagination or depth of the story, you know, like we were just chatting about, you know, the potential of having landforms, shapes, and, you know, the world, you know, coming to be through different creation entities and things like that. It's still like not a nut that I've cracked, you know, like within animation.
Sure.
Because it's like millions of dollars, you know, that you need to sort of like put into the production to be able to realize something so vast and so imaginative. You know, like we're working on this thing at the moment with mob from, you know, from Gilay country, you know, your Dingy mob. And like part of that project is the creation story of the Barrier Reef. And there's like molten rocks being thrown out into this rising sea, and this beautiful giant stingray that's rising up and bringing the storm and bringing the seas up. And animation is the right tool to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
But we're quickly finding a ceiling.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We're like,
Yeah.
oh, there's only so much we can do without the prized budget that we wish we could have. You know?
How do you communicate that with like the team working on it and with the community?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I guess managing expectations a little bit, you know, and it's definitely something that our producers are really good at with me, because I'm like writing things
can
that
see
are,
it. Yeah.
things that are way too grand and way out of budget, but you know, quite quickly, you know, you learn to find where you can make it work and how you can communicate things in a more simplistic way, but still really honors the integrity of that story, you know?
Yeah. Is it a kind of a moment of taking high cultural concept and abstracts into that more representational realism or realizing of them in?
Yeah.
Is there a moment where you're like, it all clicks together and it's like, we did this?
Yeah, I think so, you know, like, I mean, one way to look at it is that, you know, that story didn't exist in a digital space beforehand. And I sometimes have to remind myself that often we are moving within this animated industry, and, you know, the projects that we're working on are sometimes kind of like the first off, you know, and we're kind of like in a lot of instances, you know, kind of the first to bring it into an animated space.
So yeah.
You know, so I'm sort of like, oh, I've got to think a bit more about who's coming behind us and like what doors can we kick in on the way through, as, you know, whatever first wave or whatnot.
So you don't have to hit that 150%
Yeah.
level yet.
Yeah,
You've got to hit that 70%.
yeah, you know, because there might be young mob coming up that are going to knock that out of the park.
Yeah, and the like
You know?
the tools and technology and
Yeah.
the knowledge of them is going to grow at the same time. Where did your training in the medium start, or in the discipline?
Yeah, that's I was, as a young fella, I was pretty obsessed with drawing.
Okay.
And, you know, like you're surrounded by different family members and uncles who are telling you of these freaky entities and like these, you know, different stories that had these wild, imaginative creatures and beings and gussies and hairymans and all these beautiful story building elements. But, you know, what was on TV was like, you know, lycra and spandex and American accents and, you know, nuclear
Little Elvis.
families, you know? Like,
For
oh,
sure,
wow,
yeah.
you know? So I would draw a lot of those things that, you know, I kind of wanted to see and wished I saw. And, you know, anyway, later down the track, that turned into like tattooing.
All right.
I was like, I want to get in the path of tattooing. Started tattooing friends in my backyard and this and that.
What age were you?
Probably from like 16 to 18.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, around that
Yeah,
time.
that was your start in the industry.
Yeah.
Cool.
You know, and at the same time, I was, you know, like doing paste ups and graph and all this type of thing, but kind of was leading down a slightly undesirable path and getting mixed up in some shit. And I kind of had one of my uncles who worked at 10 at the time. he was like, Nev, you know, come in at 10 and I want to show you something, you know. And so I went in and he showed me what his motion designers and animators were doing, and they were drawing for a living on these fucking like Cintiqs, you know, these graphics tablets. And I was like, man, you get paid for that? Like, you know, this is your job, you know?
I hope so.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so they were kind of like, yeah, it's what we do every day, you know? And I think at the time they were releasing Channel 11, yeah. And you know, I was sort of doing these like paste up stop motion things at the time.
Oh, right. Wow.
And they're like, oh, do you want to make us one of those for Channel 11? Oh, yeah, cool, yeah, for sure.
Where were you doing these paste ups?
All over the place, yeah, mainly South Coast.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
spent most of my upbringing
Yeah.
down there on Darrell country.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Was there like I don't know, like that seems like a very creative kind of path to be on whilst, you know, mischief.
Yeah, I think part of it as well was like it was a good avenue for me because I didn't necessarily as a young fella fit into the alchemy of what was valuable on the South Coast. You know, which was like your dad's in the mines, you play footy, you're a mad surfer, you're white. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah.
And so I was kind of like, I'm more interested in like this other shit, you know. So I think that just kind of like enabled me to find my clique, and that clique was other artists, you know, other graph artists and people that were doing things in that space, you know.
Yeah. Did you do walls and
Yeah, I mean that was
tags?
not well,
Oh,
definitely
okay.
not well.
Yeah, right,
Yeah,
okay.
I think that's why I got more into paste ups because I was kind of more wanting to put up things that I could spend mad time on and then roll out and put that up rather than be under the pressure of doing something decent or doing something that just marked your name and be done with it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I want to put art up there, proper art, you know? Yeah. So anyway,
Sorry, that's yeah.
no, little tangent. But so did this job with 11. And I said, oh, what do you call this? Like, what do you do? Da, 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 da. And they're like, oh, we studied, you know, like Viscom, we studied animation, this and that. And so I went and researched, like, you know, animation course. There just so happened to be one starting up at UTS. And I was like, oh, man, I want to do that. Didn't have, like, the ATAR to get in and all that type of thing. But I had a good portfolio because I'd been drawing my ass off, you know. So, yeah, I got in, and that's where I learned how to animate.
Okay.
And the craft.
What were your drawing tools before you moved to digital?
Primarily, I was just like biro pen.
Okay.
Yeah, biro pen in sketch pads. Like, I never really got out the gouache and the watercolors and the brushes, you know. Yeah, I was more like Sharpie markers, biro pens, pencils, you know, that kind of thing.
Do you still have those sketchbooks?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I'll often like, I don't know, like, you know, you get a bit shamed sometimes of your old work, but I'll often stumble upon one, you know, like tidying things up or moving things and just get a little blast, you know, of what used to be.
Yeah, I still have a whole lot of mine from art school and
Yeah.
from, you know, like just my whole teenage years of sketching. Yeah.
You realize how much of a degenerate you were.
Yeah, I actually I remember back in high school I had this conversation with my high school art teacher a few years later. And she was like, "Oh, I was so worried about what you were drawing all the time."
Oh,
And I was
true.
like, I was just drawing characters from like Doom
Oh, yeah.
and like you know like demons and stuff and people on the hung up on the walls and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's like
She thought you were into some dark shit.
yeah. But you know that's
But you gotta cycle through those things when you're young, you know. you got to exhaust those options to know what you're into and, you know, find out what sort of like you want to do eventually, you know?
Yeah, so you went UTS, you did the animation
Yeah,
course there.
first year of animation at UTS.
And that was a full-time bachelor.
Yeah, bachelor. I mean, truly, the first 2 years, I just fucked around and I was high most of it. But I remember the third year, and then that's when I kind of really understood a little bit more that this was a medium that you could actually share stories through that hadn't previously been shared through this, you know? And I was kind of like, oh man, all of those old little drawings and those old little imaginings and silly little scripts that I've been writing and this and that, like this is a viable career pathway, and I can
Sure.
start bringing these things onto screen, you know?
Do you remember like what you were working on that sort of brought that thought?
Yeah, you know, I reckon it was like less of what I was working on, but the tutors at the time.
Okay.
So we had these tutors, like it was a really small cohort, it was like 40 of us and like 6 tutors. One was like ex-Disney, 2 of them were like independent filmmakers. They were massive advocates for like indie animation and experimenting. So we got to try like stop mo, we got to try like claymation, you know. The first year we did like charcoal stop motion on like this beautiful big old brick wall, and I was like really supported to try shit out, you know. So that was really cool to sort of just know that there's a multitude of ways you can come at this. Like a lot of these institutions now, right? Like so years later, I went and worked back at UTS,
All right.
and it had changed severely. You know, so I'm teaching some of these kids, and
What had changed?
well, so they're gearing them up now for like to be a production pipeline cog in the wheel, you know? So they're kind of like gearing them up for like going out into industry in a big ass service studio where they're like coloring in, you know, a turtle shell for a year as a colorist in this really siloed position,
Yeah.
you know? Whereas when we were there, they were like, let's focus on your voice.
Everything. Yeah, and develop your voice.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
What's
yeah.
your well? Like where do you come from? What do you want to say in this space, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, that was, I found the same at, I did my first year of art school before I dropped out. And
Yeah.
it was very much at the time about finding like that's what you go to art school for. It's, yes, you want to use the tools and the equipment there, but it is about learning and finding who your voice as an artist is.
Yeah, massively. Yeah. I think at that age too, you know, like it sort of runs in parallel with so much of your life.
Yeah, that like generative time.
Yeah, you know, like you're kind of fresh out of high school, you've just kind of like broken, you know, away from a whole lot of social scenes, social circles, you're finding new ones, you know. So like in that formative time, you know, to have like an artistic outlet, you know, to sort of like even share those stories. Like I remember the content that I was making at UTS for those first couple of years were all about like the social scene and like, you know, different class systems and like race and, you know what I mean? Because it was just like, bro, I'm in the city now. I'm like,
Yes,
I'm
you've never experienced the social system.
Yeah.
Because it looks so different from the country social system.
That's it. Yeah.
You suddenly see class and you see this divide.
Big time.
I had a similar experience
Yeah.
in the city.
Yeah, it's wild, eh? Like, you know, you go from, like really, what would you say? I mean, let's say go from South Coast and Moree into the Big Smoke. And it's just like, fuck, where am I? Like this pace is massively different. People speak different. people have like this sort of desire to express themselves externally as a brand. You know what I mean? Like who they
Yeah.
are as a brand, you know. So it was, for me, it was interesting. I was just making work based around that, you know.
Yeah, interesting.
Mm.
Did you also find a difference in the anonymity between moving from the country to the city space?
Yeah. Yeah, like in terms of everyone knowing who you are.
Yeah, versus you can disappear.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's not something that I've thought a lot about, but yeah, reflecting on it, I think being able to disappear, that was a cool thing, you know. And I love the fact that, you know, I didn't know anyone. You know, I was just cruising around, and no matter what you got up to or what you did, like, not a lot of people who know you.
Yeah, you can almost create your version, your preferred version of yourself to that you get to introduce yourself
Yeah,
to
yeah,
people in that way.
yeah. And you would see it, you know, like in some of the other, I remember some of the other students who were in our cohort, they were like just code switching mad. Like there were students who were coming from, you know, rural towns who all of a sudden speaking like they were born and raised on the North Shore, and like start, you know, you see all the dress and the attire and
Yeah.
the influence of the world around you, you
I
know?
mean,
Yeah,
this is
that's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. Clearly, I don't know what influenced us, fucking brown bear.
No, it's good. It's a good thing. Like this
Mm,
is, my mom and dad lived down here when they were, well, I guess my age now, and moved up around around the same, moved up to the
yeah,
country to have kids, and
yeah,
it's like they, I moved to the city because like that was what you did to find out who you are and to be able to create who you are.
yeah.
What what was your like journey after UTS?
Yeah,
How did you kind of go from learning through to creating?
yeah. I like, I think just opened up. No. After I left, I went and hired a studio space in like this old kind of rundown timber mill on the south coast, and it was full of like surfboard shaper guy and porcelain sculptor upstairs.
This was straight out of
Yeah, because I was
uni.
like, I want to do this, you know.
Wow.
I was like, I'll do whatever it takes to make this happen. And I remember like, you know, like I was selling some other shit on the side to fund the studio, and I was like, whatever I got to do to make this work, you know.
Yeah, yeah. That's a huge step, though. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'd love to go back there. I know it's been like bougied up a bit, but I'd love to go back and just like spend some time in that little studio there. But yeah, it was a really cool place because I got to see and get exposure to a lot of different art practices in that little joint. And, you know, all the way from fine artists and painters and sculptors to, I think it was like some leather works and woodwork people, but all like just out on their own, just doing their own thing. So I kind of learned a little bit about, you know,
Getting bits and
yeah,
pieces from each other, and
yeah, yeah. And how to, you know, the freelance life and, you know, going from job to job and getting through it, getting by it. But yeah, I was just lucky, yeah. In that at that time, I remember I kind of got a gig with would have been like SBS at the time, and had a really amazing opportunity with those guys.
do you remember the gig?
Yeah, it was a project called My Grandmother's Lingo.
Oh yeah, I remember that project.
Yeah. That was like one of the first, you know, outside of illustration work and doing like tattoo designs for friends and stuff. It was like the proper production, you know, in my eyes. And I remember just working way too hard on that, bro. I was like,
Giving too much of
oh,
yourself.
big time, yeah. But you know, at that time and at that point, I was sort of like, you know, this is it. This is the one that, you know, is gonna like add. You know, this is your trajectory.
Take
you
you
know?
from here to up here.
Yeah.
I'm doing this.
That's it. Yeah.
How did you celebrate getting that job?
Oh, I don't remember how I celebrated, man. Like I think I was just, I think I might have like tricked out the space a little bit. You know, like I would have gone to Kmart and got like some new lamps or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Look,
Some candles in the corner.
I know exactly this vibe. I've been down this road.
Because, you know, I was like, oh, there's going to be people that are going to visit. I'm going to have this, you know, team that I'm going to hire and this and that.
And what happened?
I just did the whole production, all of it, one out. You know, because when they come at you with the contracts, and they're like, oh, you know, we'll give you a project fee. It's like $5,000, and you're working on this thing for like 3 or 4 months, and you're like, oh, $5,000, fuck, let's do this.
Yeah, you think $5,000 is the world at the time when your first contract.
Yeah. But it was freaky, you know, like skip forward a year or so, and that project released, and we won a Walkley Award for it. I didn't know what the fuck that was. People were like, "Do you want a Walkley Award?"
What is a Walkley?
It's like a journalism award. It's, you know, very prestigious apparently.
You still don't know what a Walkley is?
Not well. No. But that project had some power, man. Like, it was proper revitalization of language meets someone's incredible journey of, you know, absorbing as much of that language as they could from the remaining elders in the community who could speak the native tongue.
Was that sort of your first time collaborating with elders in that way?
Yeah. That was like, and it was funny, you know, like working with the journos at SPS that we're working with. Even then, you know, like, you know, it's massively something that we do now with Studio Gilay. Even then, I was like, I don't have permission from these old fellas to work on this story. Can you like get me on a call or put me in touch with them? Or and I was like, I have a really different art style to what comes out of the community. Can I work with another artist from the community? And I think for them, they were kind of like, this guy is just, he's a fucking pain in our
doesn't know
side,
what he's doing,
you know?
All of the things that go through your head.
Yeah. And so, like, I think even without knowing that that was the right thing to do, you know, for me, and something that we would later adopt and develop an entire, you know, protocol around as a studio.
It's now become the way you do things.
Yeah. You know, like if you're working with someone else's story, you know, if you're working with a different community, it's like, we need to be there. We need to be there to speak with you, to build a relationship with you, to figure out how we can best support with our tools what it is that you want to say, you know? I don't want to put my flavor on it, you know, like, I just want to be able to enable, you know? So yeah, that was kind of interesting, you know? And so that was a great kickoff gig, you know? People still email me to this day about that project. Like,
amazing.
We're like kids in Peru and Japan and like in classrooms are speaking Mara, the language from that project.
Wow.
And this has gone from like, you know, there was 3 elders who still spoke it. But now it's, you know, within this digital space and people can move through this animated journey and they have to physically speak it into the microphone to progress the animation. So yeah, it was a really early kind of, you know, call to me that like there's a real power in this medium and what it can bring to the preservation of culture, you know, revitalizing language, you know, celebrating our stories and our communities in this space, you know?
Yeah. How did you go from, I guess, like being a kid that does graph and paste ups and tattoos to, I'm not saying that that wasn't a part of culture and importance of culture, but how did you, the going, okay, culture stuff is important to you personally?
Yeah. I reckon I never saw the intersection of it as a young kid. Like I never saw it as a something that could be like a viable piece of content that we could create that other people would watch, or that other people will learn from, or that other people will listen to and alter their own perspective. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's probably like the big thing as I was producing works as a young fella. I saw like a massive separation from it. You know, like my pop, he'd always be painting. He was always creating art, but it was always like in an analog format. On canvas with paints.
What sort of art?
All sorts. Like just proliferate in many ways, like through wood carving. Painting up boomies, painting up canvases, screen printing. Like he was an entrepreneur. And like his whole hustle.
Cool.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Is that any other members of your family creative as well?
Yeah, my old boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, my old boy is like a videographer and photographer. And that's part of the reason why I was able to do like stop motion with paste ups and paint on the wall, because there was cameras laying around the place.
Ah, right.
And he'd like rope me into jobs and stuff and be like, yeah, look, young fella.
Second grip.
Yeah, that's it. Learn the tricks here, And so, yeah, that's the only reason why I could, sort of be versed in that tech.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Did you collab with the old boy at all? Like creatively? Or was it more of an assist?
Yeah, definitely more of an assist.
Okay.
It was like, like I think at the time he was doing a lot with Qantas.
Oh, wow.
And this is probably part of the reason why I didn't want to pursue that like pathway. But we would just go on like shoots and I'd be on Boom and like I'd be.
It's busy work. It's
like a mad hustle. You'd fly in, you got a 12-hour day, and you fly back. And I was like, I don't want to be doing that.
Yeah.
Put me in a dark room.
Give me a Cintiq.
Yeah. Give me the Cintiq and, let me just imagine other worlds,
Yeah. How did you go from my grandmother's lingo and that? What was the studio called when you started it down there?
No name, Russ.
No name?
No name. Yeah, just whoever would hire me.
Oh, right, like just proper freelance.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Yeah. And so how did you go from that to founding Gilay?
I remember just bouncing off different gigs, just I think after my grandma's lingo, I at least had like a notch on my belt. And, I had illustrations and little gammon, like paste up animations and things that I'd done. But it was a little slowly growing portfolio. And I think I might have just kind of a bit of a snowball effect, picked up another animated work here and there, building that portfolio. Yeah,
Can I ask, how were you choosing what became part of the portfolio?
That's true.
At the time.
Yeah.
Versus how do you choose now what becomes part?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely something that existed then and existed now, is that the stories that we work on, we need to be able to walk away from them knowing that they have some kind of meaningful impact beyond, just a straight up first time screening. Something that has residual effects. So there's very, very, very limited, like it's such a small percentage of work that we're doing, like within a commercial space. We're so lucky in the storytelling that we've been able to do, that it calls to something kind of beyond the transactional nature of what a lot of animation work can get wrapped up in. Like it can get wrapped up in service work on external IP that belongs to someone in the US. It can get wrapped up in advertising and horse racing and, like
It's very
things
easy.
like that.
I imagine it's very easy to chase the money on that side of
Yeah,
things.
big time. Yeah. And that can be tough, like when you got people to, feed, you got crew, you got staff, you got lights to keep on, to knock jobs back, and also ask them not to approach you again.
Sure. Yeah.
That can
So
be a tough thing.
is there a difference between when you were freelancing and now, and how you choose jobs? Like, were you just taking on everything you could back then?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I think even back then, like there was still that compass kind of guiding, because I just didn't want to. I knew if I'd crossed that line, like somewhere within me it was kind of like if I'd crossed that line, like there's almost no going back. It's out there. That was a part of your work. That was a part of your portfolio. So I think there was almost like a fear within me. It was like, I don't want to go down that path where, you get this like lucrative, kind of commercial work that the lure of that becomes so enticing that you get locked in that world, and it's hard for you to then be available to a project that has some kind of meaning to it, you know. So yeah, I think it was just a line that I wasn't wanting to, tread over.
Yeah. Was it a conscious thing, or was it an instinctual?
I think, a bit of both,
bit of
eh?
both, yeah.
Yeah, I reckon earlier on, just more of a, instinctual feeling, like you say.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
now it's a defined,
Yeah,
this is the bar.
yeah.
Yeah, wow.
And we have that discussion regularly, where people that are coming in the door and we're chatting about like the impact of this project, what do we leave audience members with if we embark on this journey? When they watch this, what do they get out of it? What is that generational outcome to this project? 10 years from now, people are going to give a fuck about it. Are people still going to be watching it and learning new things?
Who do you have that conversation with? Is that the management team, or is it everyone in the space?
Yeah, I mean,
Or is it the client as well?
I think for the most part, it's like our senior team members. But often, like we try not to, like there's, you've seen, bro, like how we'll work, like
Yeah,
any new job.
there are hierarchies, but you also try not to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything that comes in the door, like, it's all of our crew are going to be working on this just as we are. And we want them to feel some sense of fulfillment and some sense of meaning in the work that they're doing and what they're producing. And when they finish that job, some sense of pride or whatnot when they walk away from it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, that's as much of that like collaborative essence that we spoke about earlier. Like the people around you as well, like they're going through it with you. They're there, rocking up every day, working on something. So it's a real conscious decision that, also our crew are nourished in that way,
Amazing.
Mm.
Do you have like that line, that bar written down, or is it a conversational thing?
Yeah, I think it's like a case by case, because sometimes it can be a really beautiful story or working on a project with an artist or a community or whatnot that on paper looks beautiful, it's incredible. But then you talk more and you find out more about who's financing it, or you understand more about, this project being sort of like some kind of cladding for another organization. And all of that is part of that, evaluation process,
Yeah.
you know? So it's hard to develop a stringent criteria, you know?
Yes, it is. I've had the same problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we jump back to like how you went from that sort of freelance world to building Gilay? What was there a moment when you were like, I need to do something bigger than freelancing?
Yeah. So I think, project to project, different, things that I was working on. There was a job that came up with the Maritime Museum. And they had kind of put a call out for a First Nations perspective on the reselling of the Endeavour. Because at the time they were spending whatever it was,
It's like 2018 or something,
2018,
2019. Yeah.
$200 million to do this big victory lab
Yeah.
with the Endeavour, stand-up comedy routines, live music, this and that, all over the country. And they
what a
were
time.
like, expressions of interest.
Yeah.
What black fellas have got a perspective on this? And, I was writing these little skits.
Yeah, I remember
like-
seeing that at YOI. I was like, I'm not touching this.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, you really want to know? Like, all right, I'm going to write something up. So I sort of wrote this little treatment up, and it kind of turned into a script. And Cook comes back from the dead, and he becomes like an advocate for black fellas and this and that. He's this ghost and blah blah blah, played by Ross Noble and all this. And so I pitched it into him, and I fully expected it to just be like thrown out the window. But they were like, yeah, cool, let's make it. And I was like, shit, all right.
No. Oh, shit.
Cool, let's do it, And at the time, I was working on a freelance gig at Studio Hackett, and so we were working there, and I was writing a script, and some of the crew there, I was kind of like, oh, would you mind just having a read of this, like, tell me what you reckon, you guys are in animation, you watch a lot of it, this and that. And so they all kind of read it, and they were like, oh, it's funny, like, yeah, 100%, I really love this, blah, blah, blah. You should show it to James. And
James is the owner of...
yeah, James, the
Hackett.
owner of Studio Hackett. And, he was whatever, he had a crack up, and he was like, you could make this a lot bigger. At the time, I was like, 2-minute skits or something like that.
Sure.
It's like, we could turn this into a whole series, or a TV half hour or whatever. And I was kind of like, I got no idea how to do that. I don't know how to jump through Screen Australia applications, raise finance, put budgets together. I'm going to need your help.
How did you know what you didn't know?
That's a good point. I reckon at the time.
Like, how did you know you were out of your depth on being able to do something?
I think I might have started to look at the Screen Australia website, and there was like just mad gibberish. I was like, I don't know what any of this is. Finance plans, A to Z budgets, above the line, below the line. You know what I mean? I was just like taking stories and making a move up until that point, and all of that producing side of town, that was just like a whole brand new game that I had no awareness of. And James kind of said, oh, look, we can have our senior producers look over this and really help you sculpt out a plan for this, and apply for more funding and this type of thing. So long story short, we do all those applications. it gets up, we get financed
Through Screen,
through
Australia.
Screen, through Create, and then a bit of ABC funding.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm learning a lot along the way. I'm learning all this, like this new,
Are you learning the tools side of things or the producing?
the producing,
Yeah,
and
and the
like
management.
yeah, what's involved in that, and like proper schedules, not like me drawing squares on my wall, like old way. And so I'm like fascinated. I'm like, I want to know more about this process. Tell me more about, drawing up contracts and paying talent and, negotiating with freelancers and all this type of thing. So, we were on that journey together. And, it gets up, about a year and a half production. We make it. And
Did you ever imagine it being when you first started writing, that it would be a year and a half long production?
no,
No.
no chance. It was like, it was interesting though. Like I think at the time, James and the producers at the time had a sort of a plan for it, but at the same time, I saw an opportunity to sort of recalibrate how we could do things on these types of productions. So I was like, part of a huge chunk of this budget needs to be for us going and speaking with community, to employ young blackfellow artists, designers, talent, 3D modelers. Let's get internships happening. So I'm like there with this mad grand dream of like, setting up the ideal production. And in the scheme of things, in their world at the time, this wasn't like a giant production budget.
Yeah.
But for me, this was like an opportunity to, recalibrate and sort of like have really
Foundation.
desired outcomes, So that was really amazing, like across the whole spectrum. It was like all black fellow cast, bar Ross Noble, all the way through to in all the below the line roles, from composition to all of the on the tools people of that work. We were just like bringing as many mob along for the journey. And I think, a big part of that production and sort of like the willingness and the desire and, sort of like the sort of want to replicate this way of working into the future. James and I sort of just like come together like Voltron, and we're just like, let's do this. Like I've still got things to learn. You've got like 25 years in this game. Let's make this new company Gilay, and we're gonna like rewire the way we do things in the space.
That project was cooked.
Cooked.
That was yeah.
Yeah. Animated adult comedy
Yeah.
out on ABC, Highview and Grouse House.
We'll put the link in all the description stuff there. That's all good. Where did the name Gilay come from? Take your time with everything.
Oh yeah, I forgot we can.
You can chuck that down if you want.
Yeah.
Don't feel like you have to hold on to it.
I feel like my voice is starting to leave the building. Yeah, the name of Gilay.
Yeah, what is Gilay?
Gilay is a Gamilaroi word for moon. And I mean, look, to be completely honest, it was one of many on a list of what we should call the company. But there is something that is, alluring by the moon, by the moonlight. There are some, beautiful stories out there of the moon and, the mystery of the moon. So, I mean, look, there's no real like meaty, meaningful reason as to why we opted for Gilay.
Just felt right.
Felt right. That's it.
Are you? What's your relationship with spirituality?
That's a good question. With spirituality, I'm gonna have to think on that.
What's your relationship with religion?
mm. I don't have a relationship with religion, but to talk more on spirituality, that's like a big change up. We change the room up right there. But I feel most connective, most energized, in the sense of how I feel the definition of spirituality sits with me when you know, I'm outside. I'm recharging when I'm feet in the water, when I'm listening to that wind blow through those leaves, when I'm feeling that dirt between my toes. That for me is like, and like we, as young fellas, we had this thing, right? Our uncles would tell us about the three families, like it's just like a philosophical underpinning, right?
Sure.
Gamilaroi law.
Yeah.
And it's like your first family is your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, your aunties, your uncles. Second family is your broader community, different clan groups, people that you have a relationship with beyond your own skin. And your third family is that natural world, This country is everything that exists within its stories, within our language that we talk to it and sing to it and everything that comes from it. That's where our Thawan comes from, our Dohi, our spirit. And those three are like intrinsically connected. And one does not exist without the other. So for me as a young fella coming up, having that, and having a big family around us, like that's for me as close to that sense of spirituality that I have, Those three families, they oscillate in that realm of spirituality for me. Yeah.
Does that relationship pull through to your like creative work? When you're making, does that just naturally come through, or do you find ways in projects to bring that in?
Yeah, massively, yeah. I think the fundamentals of storytelling are, so deeply, embedded in relationships with things, with each other, with the natural world, with our place, with our sense of belonging. It's the tether between things, like that's essentially what a relationship is, and the stretch and the strain or the nourishment within that tether, and I think a lot of our work, no matter what we do, we often try to bring in some semblance of what I think is the family that's being most neglected, the third
Okay.
family.
Yeah.
Increasingly kids and people are becoming more disconnected with the natural world. They're knowing less about seasonality. They're knowing less about the ways in which its knowledges can sustain us. Having knowledges of it, will sustain the natural world and respect for it. I think and it's ironic because we work in a digital space, but so many kids exist entirely in that world, and have little connection to the natural world, in some sense of spirituality. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of our work definitely tries to bring that back,
Yeah.
and what that means to have that as part of your love for something, and your appreciation for something. Yeah.
When you're starting to create, or when you're getting concepting or coming up with ideas, or when you're starting to put pen to paper, or like the stylus to the Cintiq, do you have rituals or habits that you use to get into the flow?
Um, Yeah, there's a few different like techniques, for a lack of a better term. Um, I think a lot of them I do these days without even knowing. Um,
Becomes embodied.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
like well, I think one of them is that I always have to start, in an analog sense. Um, yeah, always have to start in a way that feels like connective, um, be it pencil and paper, be it a phone call, speaking to someone about a concept, about an idea, just hearing someone else's perspective, and sharing my own, having a back and forth, teasing out an idea, having a sit down and a cup of tea with people, with our crew. Um,
Kind of comes back to that connection
yeah,
again. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, that's there's many different variations of it. Like sometimes I got to leave Sydney and I got to get out of Sydney and I'll take the troopy out and I'll go out somewhere, or just go for a bushwalk or go down to the beach. But that space then becomes an incubator, be it the pen on the paper, be it out in the scrub, or be it on the phone. That for me is a subliminal way in which I can tease out ideas and think about things. Um, yeah, I think they're like the techniques in a sense.
Yeah. When do you find ideas come best?
Mm.
Like,
Um,
are there specific moments in your like day to day life when you're like, "Ooh,
mm.
there's an idea"?
Yeah. Um, anytime. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you don't know when it's gonna hit you. Like I haven't found there's a trend or a pattern. Sometimes, you just get into a flow and things feel right, things feel good. Sometimes it's off the back of just a conversation, ordering like a sandwich at the deli, but something about that triggered something as a catalyzing moment that, made you think about something from another way, another perspective. It could be through music, like just something that you feel, that washes over you. Like I haven't noticed no pattern, you know. Um, what I have noticed is that often, like it'll come, like ideas and things and whatnot will there's sort of like these waves,
Yeah.
and then I
Like
have
you'll
like
have
an acute,
several at once
yeah,
and pop, 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 pop.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, like that acute awareness of like, oh, it's washing through now. Be in that space where you can document, you can record, you can
Harness
draw,
it.
you can write,
Yeah.
and then when that little trough's coming, you're like, no, we'll just ride this out.
Yeah.
Mm,
Amazing.
mm,
Um, when you were first talking, you were talking about that a lot of your practice is
mm,
about creating space.
mm, mm,
How do you do that
mm,
for space for others and space
mm.
for the story that needs to be told?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think there's probably a lot of different ways at various stages across a production or a work that we're creating. But I think from the outset, um, I try to remove the transactional nature of the way that some relationships or that some projects that I've worked on in the past are really imbued with, like, and kind of strip that away a little bit and start to connect with who I'm collaborating with. Like, it's really amazing that you've brought this project to us, and we think it's a great story. It could have a really beautiful outcome, and it's got, I don't know, a healthy budget, a really good artist attached to it. But for me, I want to know who I'm working with. Tell me about you. We've just met on Zoom, or you've just come into Gilay. I want to know what motivates you. What are you passionate about? Do you want to sit down for a cup of tea? You want to go have lunch, go have beer, whatever?
Can you have a personal relationship?
Yeah. That's a big part of it.
Absolutely.
You know, like if we're going to go on this journey together and we're going to create something, you know, that we hope has a really beautiful, flourishing moment in its own space, I want to know who you are, you know, because we're about to work on this thing for like 6 months, a year, 2 years, you know, together. So that's like I think one of the biggest things of creating space to understand who you're going to work with, what motivates you, how can I best work with you, what do you need most from me as a collaborator, you know, how can we sort of like optimize our own practices best, you know. You have kids at home that, you know, we can make work around pickup time, like when's your best time to meet, you know, when are you, all of those things,
Yeah.
you know, I think are really important.
Have you had projects that you have felt have failed?
Yeah, no, for sure. Always.
Yeah.
Always, yeah. You know, from gargantuan failings through to just being like too OCD to enjoy the work you've just created because all you see are the mistakes in it. You know, there's a scale to the fail, you know, like,
Sure.
and it exists on so many levels, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, I think sometimes I feel the fail most when it's like not necessarily the content outcome, but the relationships within that project or the impact that project will have on people's lives after it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Is that a lesson you've taken away from those?
Yeah, I think so, you know, and it's probably why it's such a thorough consideration before we kick off on something, you
Yeah.
know, and just to make sure that we do our due diligence.
Before taking something on.
Yeah. And if we need to, you know, like as an example, you know, we worked on a project. Sorry,
All good, bros. Take your time.
let's have a little sip, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, bros. Yeah, I'll give like an example that I think was a good learning. I think it should be fine. I'm not going to call anyone out or drag them or nothing. No, it's all good. Yeah. So yeah, I think a good example was we were working on this feature-length film with a big streamer, a big SVOD, and
What was that word? Sorry.
like a, you know, like
Streaming service.
yeah,
or-
streaming service,
Yeah.
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 And we were sort of brought on to do, you know, these little animated segments within it, really beautiful, hand drawn, this and that. But the story itself went to a place that it ended up in a place that had a really deep, a really long-standing cultural significance to a particular community. And, you know, it was this massive opportunity for us as a studio. And we were like, you know, it's one of the big streamers, and, you know, like we've got an opportunity to work with LA and you know, Tokyo and all these different little micro satellite production companies
Yeah.
who are all working on this, and it's good for the profile of the studio and all this type of thing.
It comes with its own pressures as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But there's something fundamentally wrong with this film. And are we going to be the people that rock the boat on this? And it ended up that we made the decision that we would rock the boat on it.
You would speak up.
Would speak up. We would say that you're not following protocol to any extent. You haven't been out to this place without naming where it is. You haven't been out to this place
Yeah.
and spoken with these mob out here where these, you know, the promised land where all of these characters end up, where you're saying they all belong. And so it was an interesting moment for us. And I think it was like it wasn't necessarily a failing, but it wasn't necessarily a win, but it was right for the project. It was right for the story. It was something that I think for us was really important to communicate despite the opportunity, you know? And I can't say whether that or not has tarnished our relationship. You know, I don't think so. But it meant they had to rewrite. They had to reanimate.
Yeah.
They had to send us out there to do that consultation, you know?
Do you feel that your role is to serve story first or culture first or the project first, or is all of that the same?
That's such a good question. Yeah, where does the value lie? Yeah.
And I didn't put the presenter or the funder in that because, you know, they're just the vehicle for this thing to be seen and to happen. This is the meat of things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Or are all of those things the same thing?
I think in a way they are. They definitely are. More so story and culture and the integrity of both. And it not being, particularly in, you know, like in the film industry for so long, blackfellas stories were all told, you know, from white directors, and, you know, like, sure, Galpalil was in them, but, you know, like truly it was led by Dahir or, you know, whoever these directors were. And I think that is like always front of mind for me. It's like part of that space has to be created so that the integrity of that story can be known and it can like find its way into whatever modality it's being worked into. And voices from that community, artists, musicians, if they have an opportunity to come onto it as well, and we can make that happen, 100% we'll do that, you know, because then that only enriches that story, you know. If something was an oral story that also has a dance attached to it and a song and art practice, why not bring all of that together? We have the ability to do that in animation. You know, it's the convergence of all those things. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that really answers your question around value.
No, it's,
You know?
yeah, it does. Music. What is your relationship to music? And particularly, not just in your work, but in life.
Yeah, I mean, that's like your teleportation device. You know, like, yeah, for me, it's like you can try on a different way of being, a different place of existing, a different feeling all through music, you know. For me, it's always been that, you know. There's songs and playlists that make you feel, take you somewhere, you know. I think for me that's the relationship.
Yeah.
with
And
it.
how does that change with music and animation or like scoring?
Sorry, bro. Do you want to ask that? Let me just have a sip.
Yeah, yeah, go.
Sorry.
Take your time.
Mm.
How does that relationship with music change with work
Mm.
and creation and music being a part of that creation?
Yeah, I think it's like within our projects and what, you know, we have the ability to do is story enhancement, you know, just to deepen that world. There's only so much that visual world building can do. But when you plug into that song space, that can add a whole new layer, you know, that can tell a whole new story. So, you know, be it, it's funny, you know, like, even if we're making an animation that's like based out in bloody Menindee and we're creating a work, we want to make sure that the bird life, that the sounds of the leaves rustling in the wind are all like species that exist in that place.
The scape.
All of that scape
Yeah.
needs to be from that place, you
Yeah.
know? Like, I don't want some generic, you know, like library bird sound from Scandinavia.
Oh my god, we need
rocking
to.
up.
Did we talk about this before already? Like outside of here?
Maybe. Yeah.
That's my life.
Yeah,
man, is
yeah,
like
yeah.
making sure we have that.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
authenticity in that scape, you know?
Yeah.
And we've been called out on it before.
Oh really?
And it's interesting, like, so we were working on the lullaby.
In what way? What?
A good way.
Oh,
nothing,
okay.
nothing like, because we thought we were doing the right thing. We're working on this lullaby with Troy Casadale. Came out on the ABC, and we're working on the soundscape. We're like, oh, it'd be really cool. There's curlews in it, you know. There's different, you know, little songbirds in there, and you know, the white-bellied sea eagle, and so we went and downloaded all these sounds and things like that. And we thought we were doing a really good thing. You know, it's like authentic to that area. These are all species that exist there. But then someone at the ABC was a mad twitcher, like a bird watcher.
Bird watcher. Yes, yes.
And so we got called out on that. And they were like, even the time of day.
Oh, this specific bird wouldn't be out at
Yeah.
that specific time in that specific area.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So we were like, wow, that's a whole nother level of detail,
Yeah.
you know? But, you know, it all plays into that storytelling, you know? Although you might not, as an audience member who's watching that lullaby, that animation, and you hear that bird, you might not pick up on the fact that it's 2 hours too early, but you're going to feel it. You know what I mean? Because we've all been out there.
It's a moment that might take a audience member out of that experience because they'll go, "Oh no, that's not." Yeah. Did you change that, or did you have you kept it in?
Yeah, no, we changed it. Yeah, it was a good shout. Yeah.
Cool. What about when you're like working with musicians? Do you, when you're like starting a animation or when you're animating, do you work with with a certain song in mind or with a certain musician in mind? At what point do you get them involved?
Yeah. It depends on the project. You know, like some jobs, you just can't stretch the budget to original composition. You got to pull some library track that sounds like it. You know, it aligns with what you would have ideally briefed into a composer. And, that's an unfortunate thing, but sometimes it's just the case. But working with composers is such a beautiful experience, because they then become part of that storytelling journey, and you get to see how they interpret the same concepts that you've reinterpreted into animation, and they get to go on a whole different way of telling that story. So when we are working with composers, part of my brief is, what you're doing, your craft, your skills, exactly what you need to do to bring this story to where it needs to be. So all I'm doing is laying these broad brushstrokes and articulating the storytelling journey that we've been on, and some of the thematics that might run through the animation, and then how we want people to feel, when they watch this, or the impact that we want this piece to have. But then it's like, that's all for the composer. Choose the instrumentation, choose how, you move through, and choose how it flows with the animation. If you think it needs an impactful moment there, like, you go all in. I really try not to be prescriptive.
How do you write a good brief?
Like this, a good brief is best delivered in person, or over the phone, I feel, and then followed up with just reaffirming notes around all the things you discussed. Sometimes there'll be elements that, we really want to bring, like local language into the soundscape. Even if it's just like texture, I want people who walk into that room to be immersed in language that's been spoken where that film's playing for millennia, whether they know it or not, and hopefully it seeps into their pores somehow, and so, sometimes we'll just put provisions around supporting the composer for what they might need. If you want to work with, a linguist, or if you want to work with local mob that still speak language, or if you need us to put you in touch with, someone who can access bird sounds.
You're a connector, aren't you?
Yeah. Like, I really want to be able to enable them to have what they need and desire to really build the most rich piece of storytelling they can.
Yeah. How has it felt to build something that allows you to work with young mob in the industry?
Yeah, I feel like we are, to throw it back just a little bit.
Yeah, Ross.
When I was freelancing, I would have worked on a multitude of projects that I never once bumped shoulders with another blackfeller animator who was working in the space. There might have been artists, there might have been musicians, but like, as a one-out, animator entity, and that was like, for me, that was kind of rocked me a bit, like, where are all our people in this industry? Why don't we have representation, on the tools? So I think I carried that, and it's a bit of why when we spoke about Cooked, when I had that first opportunity on what I saw as this mega production at the time, I was like, let's hire everybody, everyone. We're going to LAPA, we're going to the Australian Museum, we're going to look at artifacts, we're setting up internships, we're going to talk to the aunties about what they reckon about this and that. And so it's almost like it all just exploded out in Cook's. And then as Gilay sort of formed, you know, although it's still in its infancy, we are now starting to find partnerships that allows us to go out into different communities, take iPads out, take computers out, a presentation, whatever it may be, to talk about this space being a viable career pathway, you know, and something that young mob can push into and work within and, you know, share their voice and celebrate our stories, you know.
Yeah.
And sort of, it's been, you know, a couple of years since we've been starting to roll these programs out and get internships in through the studio and develop those partnerships. But even still, you know, it's a really small pool that we can pull from, you know.
Is it getting bigger?
Yeah.
Have you seen that since you started, that it's growing?
Yeah, I think so. I think now that the entry in is becoming less expensive, and the time that you need to dedicate to the craft, to, like, you know, skill up into which you're good at what you do. I think that gap is shortening. You know, like now we can do it in Procreate, you know, whereas before you needed like a graphics tablet, a half decent machine, you needed like access to internet so you could get a cracked version of Photoshop, you know, or an animation software, some editing software. You know, you needed all that, but now you just throw $30 at Apple Store and you can roll out with Procreate. You know, if you just got a low end of the, you know, bottom rung iPad, you know, you can make it work.
Yeah, you can be learning the techniques and the tools. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a piece of content or media or like a show or something that, like, you can point to that, like, sent you down the path?
Like as in, like as a, what pushed me into animation?
Pushed you into the creative. Is there something like that you can think back and it pulls from your back of your memory that inspired you?
Oh man, so many things, but it's like, I think like one of the early memories, I reckon, and I don't even know if this has significance, but it's just the first thing that's popping up right now. You know, I mentioned my old man used to work for Qantas. He used to be able to bring the VHSs back before they went on in-flight entertainment. So they were like pre-cinema release VHS, and I could get some kind of insight into, like,
Probably had the like logo baked into it or something.
Yeah. Had that little watermark there, you know, property of. I don't even know where this memory has come up, but anyway, let's roll with it. He used to bring those back, and he used to bring back, like, you know, a lot of kind of like an eclectic mix of films, and for some reason he'd bring back new ones, but he'd also bring back like classics. And I don't know whether it was like a conscious decision of him wanting to allow us kids to look at good cinema or whatever it was. But we were watching, I remember I was like, I don't know, it could have been like 12 or 11. We were watching like Romper Stomper and like Wake in Fright. And, you know, Once Were Warriors.
Yeah.
Or like 10-year-old kids or something, you know. And I was like, man, these films make me feel something, you know. And like often, you know, Romper Stomper was like talking about the fringes, and I'm seeing people that are living more like my family, and like they're exploring dynamics within a family structure that felt more familiar, to our stories. And Romper Stomper's talking about racial division and all these types of things. And I don't know why that's like jumping out to me, but some of those early films, like he'd bring back like I remember he showed us The Tracker when we were young, and all these are sort of like really early films, and Yongu Boy. And I don't know whether that was like part of his way of trying to allow us to understand more about the industry that he was in and the space that he worked in, or whether he was just like, I can get these movies and I'll
This
just
is
leave
great.
them.
I'll feed you. I'll feed you. Keep you occupied for a
Yeah,
while.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was like a big thing. And yeah, like animation, I think that came a lot later. I think my love for illustrating, tattooing, and cinema came well before I even knew the world of animation was a viable way that I could express storytelling.
Do you work in other mediums? Or do you explore other mediums as a fun?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like less these days, you know. But I will still get on the pens. I still get on the pens. I do a lot of carving, you know.
Oh, right. Wow.
Just like woodworking is a really cathartic, beautiful way to recapture that space that trance that you could go in, when you're working analog with your hands. I find that's a kind of an interesting thing for me these days, in getting away from the screen, Dabbled in a little bit of music production on my little OP1. That's a really nice way to break away,
Yeah, cool.
and just be anywhere, just making little beats in isolation. But yeah, I mean, not often, you know. Yeah, I think so often I'm like trying to write new ideas and new scripts and things like that for Gilay's development slate, you know, new IP that I really want us to start developing up. Or yeah, that's almost like the majority of that spare time outside of production. Yeah.
How do you define success for you versus defining success for Gilay?
Within like a
Personal, creative, professional, financial, wherever you want to take it.
gee, you got some big deep questions on you. Success, man. Fuck.
It's something like with Awesome Black that we that's our question we ask
Yeah,
every
yeah.
person that comes through the door is like, what is success for you personally on this project in your career?
Yeah.
That
yeah.
can change, but like, what does it look like for you today? Like that's one of our like when people come through the door, whether we are going to work with them. Because if they say, we'll cut this bit out, but if they say, I want to get famous, I'm like, well, we can't help you. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's tough. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know, like, precisely, where that value lies. But I think one of the most frequented, like, gauges for me on success is like the people who are around you and the relationships you have with them. Be that in your, within your personal life, within your family. How can you be a conduit for them to feel nourished, or feeling like they have some sense of value from what you can contribute to their life. I think that's success for me, in one sense of it. You know, like that is an act of a service. You know, that's a big one. It's definitely not like monetary gain. That like I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if that was a big motivator. You know.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a big one.
yeah.
You know, that's a huge gauge of whether or not something in my mind is like future proofed, is going to have longevity, is going to have a lasting impact, the way that it affects people, you know? Yeah, so I mean, that could just be part of one version of success, but yeah, it's the first thing that comes to mind.
Cool. Let's let's get you home.
Me a warm cup of tea.
Yeah, bro.